Ever wondered what happens when engineers decide to throw the automotive rulebook out the window and build something completely insane? Well, buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of the most bizarre and brilliant automotive experiments in American history. The 1961 Pontiac Tempest wasn't just different, it was downright revolutionary. And trust me, by the time we're done counting down these 20 shocking facts, you'll understand why this forgotten compact was simultaneously the most advanced and most problematic car General Motors ever built. From its half a V8 engine that shook like an earthquake to the rope drive system that defied physics, this is the story of automotive ambition gone beautifully wrong. If you're into weird automotive history, smash that like button and let's get started. Number 20, the engine that was literally half a car. Here's something that sounds like automotive fiction, but is absolutely true. The Pontiac Trophy 4 engine wasn't designed from scratch. It was literally half of Pontiac's legendary 389 cubic inch V8. Not inspired by, not similar to, but actually half of the same engine. John DeLorean's team faced a problem. They needed a 4-cylinder engine that could be built on the same assembly line as the V8 to save money. Their solution was genius and insane in equal measure. They took a 389 V8 block, cut it in half, and created a 194.5 cubic inch slant 4 that shared over 120 components with its V8 sibling. The same cylinder head, valves, pistons, connecting rods, even the timing chain. The only new parts were the crankshaft, camshaft, and intake manifold. This meant assembly line workers could build both engines using the same tools and procedures. But here's where it gets weird. The 4-cylinder was mounted at a 45-degree angle to the right, earning it the nickname Slant 4 decades before Chrysler made the term famous. Why the angle? Because that's exactly how the cylinder sat in the original V8. It was cheaper to tilt the entire engine than redesign the block. The result was an engine that made decent power, 110 to 166 horsepower, depending on configuration, but shook so violently that mechanics nicknamed it the hay baler. Pontiac knew it would vibrate, but they figured the car's unique driveline would help smooth things out. They were wrong. Number 19, the rope drive that wasn't actually rope. Everyone called it the rope drive, but the Pontiac Tempest's famous curved drive shaft had nothing to do with rope. This was a solid steel shaft, precisely machined from SAE 8660 nickel chrome molybdenum alloy that transmitted power through a gentle arc from the front-mounted engine to the rear-mounted transaxle. The shaft was only 5/8 inch thick on automatics and 3/4 inch on manual cars, incredibly thin for the job it had to do. But here's the brilliant part. Because the drive shaft ran at engine speed rather than multiplied transmission speed, it could be much smaller than conventional drive shafts. The curve wasn't for show either. Engineers discovered that the 30-degree twist the shaft could handle under torque actually helped dampen the violent vibration from that half a V8 engine. The shaft ran inside a pressed steel torque tube that formed a protective housing. The whole assembly was so precisely engineered that it was magnafluxed, shot-peened, and coated with scratch protectant. But the real genius was in the mounting. 2 rubber-isolated ball bearings supported the shaft along its length, allowing it to flex and absorb harmonics that would have destroyed a rigid drive shaft. When it worked, it was smooth as silk. When it didn't, well, that's another story entirely. Number 18, the transaxle that came from space. The Tempest's rear-mounted transaxle wasn't borrowed from another car. It was adapted from Chevrolet's revolutionary Corvair, but with modifications that made it even more unusual. The automatic version used a 2-speed planetary gear set with something truly bizarre, an air-cooled torque converter. That's right, the torque converter hung out in the open air behind the rear bumper, like some kind of mechanical tail. But the really weird part was inside. The transaxle used 3 concentric shafts, all turning in the same direction, but at different speeds. The inner shaft connected the drive shaft to the torque converter impeller. The middle shaft connected the turbine to the planetary gears. The outer shaft connected the gears to the differential. In high gear, there was even a mechanical connection that bypassed 40% of the torque around the converter for better fuel economy. It was brilliant engineering that worked surprisingly well when everything was perfect, but perfect was not a word often associated with early automatic transmissions. The air-cooled converter would overheat in stop-and-go traffic. The complex shaft arrangement was sensitive to fluid contamination, and the whole system was so unusual that most mechanics refused to work on it. Number 17, the swing axle suspension that tried to kill you. The Tempest borrowed its independent rear suspension from the Corvair, and that was not a good thing. The swing axle design looked modern and sophisticated, but it had a deadly flaw that wouldn't be fully understood until Ralph Nader started investigating dangerous cars. Under hard cornering, the outside rear wheel would tuck under the car, causing sudden, violent oversteer that could flip the vehicle. The Tempest actually handled this better than the Corvair because its 50-50 weight distribution was more forgiving. But the basic problem remained. Drive a Tempest hard into a corner, lift off the throttle, and the back end would try to overtake the front. Experienced drivers learned to manage this with careful throttle control, but ordinary drivers were caught off guard. The suspension geometry meant that as the car leaned in corners, the rear wheels developed positive camber, reducing contact with the road just when you needed maximum grip. Pontiac knew about this issue, but couldn't fix it without redesigning the entire rear rear suspension. Instead, they quietly added a front anti-roll bar partway through the 1961 model year and hoped for the best. It helped, but the fundamental problem remained. Number 16, the Motor Trend Award that almost didn't happen. The 1961 Pontiac Tempest won Motor Trend's Car of the Year award, but the voting was closer than anyone admitted publicly. Internal documents later revealed that the award committee was deeply divided. Half the judges loved the Tempest's innovation and engineering ambition. The other half thought it was too weird and unreliable for average buyers. The final vote came down to a single judge who changed his mind at the last minute after driving a high-performance version with the 4-barrel carburetor. He was impressed by the car's handling balance and unique character, but even Motor Trend's own road test revealed problems. The magazine noted excessive engine vibration, transmission reliability concerns, and handling quirks that required driver adaptation. They gave it the award anyway because they believed innovation deserved recognition, even when it wasn't perfect. The award generated tremendous publicity for Pontiac, but it may have actually hurt sales. People expected a Car of the Year winner to be refined and reliable. The Tempest was neither. Number 15, the timing chain disaster that Pontiac tried to hide. The Trophy 4 engine had a dirty secret that Pontiac never advertised. The timing chain had a tendency to stretch dramatically, and in some cases, snap completely without warning. The problem was inherent in the engine's design. That massive inline 4 created harmonic vibrations that stressed the timing chain in ways Pontiac's engineers never anticipated. The chain tensioner was supposed to take up slack, but it couldn't handle the extreme loads. Early engines would develop timing chain noise around 40,000 miles. By 60,000 miles, many were experiencing timing problems that affected performance. At 80,000 miles, chains were breaking, causing catastrophic engine damage. Pontiac quietly redesigned the chain and tensioner system twice during the Tempest's production run, but never issued a recall or admitted there was a problem. Instead, they told dealers the timing chain noise was normal for a high-performance 4-cylinder engine. Some dealers learned to identify cars with chain problems and would quietly replace them under warranty. Others weren't so helpful, leaving owners to deal with expensive repairs. Today, timing chain failure is the number one reason why so few Trophy 4 engines survive. Number 14, the brake system borrowed from a much smaller car. Here's something Pontiac definitely didn't want buyers to know. The Tempest brake system was essentially unchanged from the much lighter Corvair. Same drums, same shoes, same hydraulic system. The problem was that the Tempest weighed significantly more than the Corvair, especially with the optional aluminum V8 engine. This created a brake system that was marginal at best and dangerous at worst. The 9-inch drums were undersized for a car that could weigh nearly 3,000 pounds fully loaded. Under hard braking, the drums would heat up quickly, causing brake fade that could be genuinely frightening. The situation was made worse by the Tempest's unique weight distribution. With 50% of the weight on the rear wheels, the rear brakes did more work than in conventional front-heavy cars. But the drums weren't designed for this extra load. Pontiac tried to address the problem with optional heavy-duty brakes, but these were rarely ordered because buyers didn't understand the need. Number 13, the production line that nobody could figure out. Building the Tempest required retooling part of Pontiac's production line for components that had never been mass-produced before. The rope drive shaft alone required new manufacturing techniques because of its precise tolerances and unusual curved shape. Assembly line workers had to learn to install rear-mounted transaxles, something no American automaker had attempted on a large scale. The engine installation was complicated by the 45-degree angle, which required special tooling and procedures. Quality control was a nightmare because inspectors didn't know what normal looked like for these unusual components. Early production cars had wildly inconsistent build quality as workers learned their jobs. Some cars were assembled perfectly. Others had problems that wouldn't show up for months. The curved drive shaft was especially problematic. The precise alignment required between the engine and transaxle meant that small assembly errors could cause vibration, noise, and premature wear. Workers had to measure and adjust each installation individually, something mass production wasn't designed to handle. Number 12, the aluminum V8 option that almost nobody bought. Pontiac offered an optional 215 cubic inch aluminum V8 in the Tempest for 1961 and 1962, and it was a genuinely advanced engine. Built by Buick, this all-aluminum V8 weighed just 330 pounds installed, but produced up to 215 horsepower. It was decades ahead of its time in materials and construction. The problem was the price. At $261, equivalent to about $2,500 today, it cost more than many people paid for their entire used car. For that money, buyers got an engine that was lighter, more powerful, and smoother than the Trophy 4, but it came with its own set of problems. The aluminum block required special coolant and careful maintenance to prevent corrosion. Many mechanics didn't know how to work on aluminum engines, leading to expensive mistakes. Only about 2,004 Tempests were built with the aluminum V8, less than 2% of total production. It was isworked. Number 11. The floor that was too flat. Pontiac marketed the Tempest's flat floor as a major advantage, and compared to conventional cars with driveshaft humps, it was impressive. But there was a hidden downside that became apparent only after people started living with these cars. The flat floor was achieved by routing the curved driveshaft through a tunnel in the unibody structure. This tunnel was perfectly positioned to collect water, dirt, and road salt. In northern climates, the tunnel became a rust trap that would eventually cause structural damage. The problem was made worse by inadequate drainage. Water would enter through small gaps in the tunnel ceiling and have nowhere to go. It would sit there, slowly corroding the metal from the inside. By the mid-1960s, Tempests in Rust Belt states were developing floor rot that was invisible from the outside but structurally dangerous. The tunnel rust was difficult to detect during routine inspections because it happened inside the structure. Number 10. The handling that was too good. This sounds like a contradiction, but the Tempest's near-perfect weight distribution created a handling characteristic that many drivers found unnerving. Unlike conventional front-heavy cars that understeered predictably, the Tempest was neutral to slightly oversteering in most conditions. This meant the car responded instantly to steering inputs and changed direction with an eagerness that caught drivers off guard. Professional testers loved this characteristic, but ordinary drivers found it twitchy and unpredictable. The car required more attention and skill to drive smoothly than typical American cars of the era. Small steering corrections could cause the car to dart sideways unexpectedly. On crowned roads, the Tempest would follow every irregularity in the pavement. This wasn't a defect. It was the natural result of having equal weight on all four wheels. European sports cars behaved similarly, but American drivers weren't used to cars that demanded constant attention. Number 9. The vibration solution that made things worse. Pontiac engineers knew the Trophy 4 engine would vibrate, so they tried several solutions to minimize the problem. The most elaborate was a system of specially tuned engine mounts that were designed to absorb specific vibration frequencies. These mounts used a combination of rubber and hydraulic damping to isolate the engine from the chassis. In theory, it was brilliant. In practice, it was a disaster. The hydraulic mounts were prone to failure, and when they failed, the vibration became worse than with conventional solid mounts. The tuned frequency approach meant the mounts worked well at certain RPMs, but amplified vibrations at others. This created a car that would smooth out at highway speeds, but shake violently at idle or during acceleration. The mounts were also expensive to replace and difficult to diagnose when they failed. Many mechanics would replace them with conventional rubber mounts, which solved the reliability problem but made the vibration worse. Number 8. The cooling system that couldn't cool. The Trophy 4's unusual 45-degree angle created cooling problems that Pontiac's engineers underestimated. The slanted engine made it difficult to properly bleed air from the cooling system, leading to hot spots that could cause local overheating even when the temperature gauge read normal. The radiator was sized for a smaller, conventional 4-cylinder engine, not the massive Trophy 4 with its inherent heat generation from vibration and internal friction. The water pump, shared with the V8, was designed for a different flow pattern and didn't circulate coolant effectively through the slanted block. These problems were compounded by the engine's tendency to run hotter than conventional 4s due to its large displacement and high compression ratio. In stop-and-go traffic or hot weather, many Tempests would overheat despite having adequate coolant levels. The problem was usually blamed on owner neglect or defective thermostats, but the real issue was fundamental design flaws in the cooling system. Number 7. The transmission that ate itself. The Tempest's automatic transaxle was a marvel of engineering complexity, but that complexity made it unreliable in real-world use. The 2-speed planetary system was fine for normal driving, but it couldn't handle the demands of American driving habits. The air-cooled torque converter would overheat in traffic, causing the transmission fluid to break down and form deposits that clogged the intricate valve body. The 3-shaft design meant that failure of any component could disable the entire transmission. The rear-mounted location made the transaxle sensitive to road debris and weather. Unlike conventional transmissions that were protected under the hood, repair was complicated by the unusual design and the fact that few mechanics understood how it worked. Most shops would simply replace the entire transaxle rather than attempt internal repairs. This was expensive and often unnecessary, but it was the only option for most owners. Number 6. The recall that never happened. Internal Pontiac documents reveal that engineers identified several safety-related problems with early Tempests that should have triggered recalls, but none were ever issued. The most serious involved the rope drive driveshaft, which could separate from its universal joints under extreme conditions. This was discovered during high-speed testing, when a prototype suffered a driveshaft failure that sent the car spinning off the track. The failure mode was rare, but potentially catastrophic, as it would leave the driver with no way to control the car's speed. A few similar failures were reported by customers, but Pontiac classified them as isolated incidents caused by abuse or poor maintenance. Another issue involved the swing axle suspension, which could cause wheels to separate from their mountings if their swing arms broke. Pontiac strengthened the components in later production, but never recalled early cars. The decision to avoid recalls was purely financial, as the company was already losing money on the Tempest program and couldn't afford the additional cost. Number 5. The racing program that backfired spectacularly. Pontiac wanted to use the Tempest to demonstrate American engineering innovation, so they built a small fleet of racing cars for international competition. The idea was to show that American compacts could compete with European sports cars on road courses. The project was a disaster from the start. The Tempest's unique powertrain was completely unsuited to racing. The rope-drive driveshaft would bind up under the extreme cornering loads of racing, causing the car to lose power unexpectedly. The rear-mounted transaxle made the car extremely tail-heavy when the fuel tank was full, but front-heavy when it was empty. This changing weight distribution made the car unpredictable to drive. The swing axle suspension was dangerous at racing speeds, causing sudden oversteer that caught even professional drivers off guard. The Trophy 4 engine couldn't rev high enough to compete with European engines, and its massive vibration would loosen critical components during races. After a series of embarrassing failures and near accidents, Pontiac quietly withdrew from international competition. Number 4. The dealers who refused to sell them. As word spread about the Tempest's problems, many Pontiac dealers began refusing to sell them. The cars were too unusual for most mechanics to service properly, leading to frustrated customers and expensive warranty claims. The dealers who did sell Tempests often found themselves dealing with angry customers whose cars were constantly in the shop for repairs. Some dealers started steering customers toward other GM cars, claiming the Tempest was sold out or unavailable. Others would only sell Tempests to customers who specifically demanded them and understood the car's quirks. A few dealers became Tempest specialists, training the mechanics and stocking unusual parts, but these were exceptions. Most dealers viewed the Tempest as a problem that hurt their reputation and profitability. Pontiac tried to address dealer concerns by offering special incentives and training programs, but many dealers remained reluctant. Number 3. The insurance companies that charged extra. Insurance companies quickly identified the Tempest as a high-risk vehicle and began charging higher premiums for coverage. The car's unusual handling characteristics led to more accidents than typical compacts, particularly single-car crashes involving loss of control. The complex powertrain resulted in more mechanical failures and higher repair costs. The swing axle suspension was specifically identified as a safety concern by some insurers, who had access to accident data that wasn't available to the public. Young male drivers, who were attracted to the Tempest's sporty image, had particularly high accident rates. Some insurance companies refused to cover modified Tempests, or those used for racing. The higher insurance costs effectively priced many potential buyers out of the market, particularly younger drivers who were the car's target audience. Number 2. The engineering team that regretted their creation. Years later, many of the engineers who worked on the Tempest admitted they knew the car had serious problems, but were pressured to put it into production anyway. John DeLorean himself later called the Tempest his biggest regret at Pontiac, saying the company should have spent more time developing the unusual powertrain before releasing it to the public. The chief engineer responsible for the Trophy 4 engine admitted that he knew the vibration would be a problem, but believed it could be solved with proper tuning and maintenance. He was wrong. The suspension engineer who adapted the Corvair's swing axle system later acknowledged that it was inappropriate for a car marketed to average drivers. Internal memos from the period show that many engineers recommended delaying the Tempest's introduction by at least a year to address known problems. Number 1. The car that killed innovation at General Motors. The Tempest commercial failure had consequences that extended far beyond Pontiac. General Motors executives concluded that American buyers weren't ready for radical innovation, and that conventional designs were safer from a business standpoint. This philosophy influenced GM's conservative approach to new car development for decades afterward. The Tempest problems also contributed to GM's 1963 decision to ban factory participation in racing, as executives lost confidence in their ability to develop competitive high-performance cars. The financial losses from the Tempest program were substantial, including not just the cars themselves, but the costly retooling of production facilities and the extensive warranty repairs. These losses made GM management much more cautious about approving unusual engineering projects. The Tempest's reputation for unreliability also damaged Pontiac's brand image at a critical time when the division was trying to establish itself as GM's performance leader. Some historians argue that the Tempest's failure delayed American adoption of advanced automotive technologies by years or even decades. Features that Pontiac pioneered in the Tempest, such as independent rear suspension and front-engine rear transaxle layouts, didn't become common in American cars until the 1980s. The irony is that the Tempest's basic concept was sound, and with more development time and better execution, it could have been revolutionary. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about the dangers of rushing innovation to market before it was ready. And there you have it. 20 shocking facts about the 1961 Pontiac Tempest that prove sometimes the most ambitious automotive project defects can also be the most problematic. This forgotten compact was simultaneously decades ahead of its time and hopelessly flawed, a brilliant concept executed too hastily for its own good. From its half a V8 engine that shook like a paint mixer to its rope drive system that worked like magic when it worked at all, the Tempest represented everything right and wrong with American automotive ambition in the early 1960s. Which of these facts surprised you the most? And what other forgotten automotive disasters deserve the deep dive treatment? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what weird cars we should investigate next. If you enjoyed this journey into automotive history's stranger corners, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories about the cars that dared to be different. Hit that notification bell too, because next week we're exploring another automotive oddball that makes the Tempest look conventional by comparison. Until then, remember that sometimes the most interesting cars are the ones that didn't quite work. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.